Al Capone fired this man for being violent. John Dillinger eventually decided he was too dangerous to ride with. And to this day, nobody has killed more FBI agents than he has. So you'd think Hollywood have had a field day with him, but when Michael Mann put out Public Enemies in 2009, Johnny Depp playing Dillinger, the thing pulling in over $214 million at the box office, the movie killed Babyface Nelson off halfway through, wiped out some of the worst chapters of his whole criminal run before they ever made it to the scene. So, the real Babyface Nelson was a lot worse than what they let you see. I'm Mr. V and welcome back to the Hidden Lens. Today we're going where the movies wouldn't go. He was born Lester Joseph Gillis on December the 6th, 1908 in the Industrial Canal District of Chicago. He was born to Belgian immigrant parents. And this kid did not ease into a life of crime. He ran head on with it. At 7 years old, on July the 4th, 1916, he got arrested for accidentally shooting a friend and got sent to the state reformatory for a whole year at 7 years old. By 12, he shot another kid in the jaw. By 14, he was working as a car thief, and the boys in his gang had already pinned a nickname on him that he had carried to his grave, Babyface. He hated it, though. Around the professional underworld, his associates called him Jimmy. But the name stuck on account of him standing 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighing about 133 pounds, with bright blue eyes and what folks called cherry cheeks. He really did look like a kid. One of the people he robbed, the wife of a Chicago mayor, Big Bill Thompson, said after he made off with $18,000 worth of jewelry of hers, that he had a baby face, that he was good looking and hardly more than a boy. Well, behind that boyish thing, though, something was broken inside of him. From 1929 to 1931, Nelson worked for Al Capone, the most powerful crime boss in all of Chicago. Same Capone who set up the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, allegedly, putting 7 vital gang members against the wall and, using that Thompson machine gun to do what Thompson machine guns do. And even Capone cut Nelson loose for being too violent. Y'all follow me here? The man who ordered one of the worst mass murders in American crime history took one look at Lester Gillis and said, yeah, no, he's too much to keep around here. Back in 1928, Nelson married a sales girl named Helen Wawzynak. By every account, she was devoted to him 100%, completely. That devotion was going to cost her everything down the line, but it also holds right up to the very end. And that's a good long while after that, too, she kept on holding up for him after he was gone. His the end. Now, let's talk about what Public Enemies actually put up on the screen. Stephen Graham turned in a real intense performance as Nelson, playing him as a psychopath in Dillinger's crew who was obsessed with, what he was always obsessed with, killing lawmen. And the movie got some of it right. It showed Nelson killing FBI agent Mr. Carter Baum during a little Bohemia lodge. There was a little mix up there on April of 1934 where Mr. Carter Baum got whacked. And that part did happen. But here's where the film tells its biggest lie. The Public Enemies, Nelson gets killed during a car chase right after Little Bohemia, shot down by Melvin Purvis off the running boards of a car. Makes for an exciting couple of minutes of cinema, but the problem is it's not right, not at all. A lot of the movie pulls from the journalist Brian Burroughs' book, Public Enemies, America's Greatest Crime Wave and the Birth of the FBI, 1933 to 1934. And even Burroughs lays out plain that Nelson's story was a long way from being over in the book. Babyface Nelson walked away from Little Bohemia. he had 7 more months in him. In those 7 months, that held some of the most violent stuff in the whole record of the American crime system. The real little Bohemia thing went down on April the 20th, 1934, when Nelson rolled up in a tucked-away lodge in Manitouche Waters, Wisconsin, with Dillinger, Homer Van Meter, and who was that? Tommy Carroll, John Hamilton, and their girlfriends. They put Nelson in a separate cabin off from everybody else, well, because, you know, they needed to keep it simple. He was a little bit too unpredictable to have that close, not in the same room or under the same roof for more than a day. When the FBI raid fell apart 2 days later, Nelson got out, and everybody else was running out the back. Nelson got out and ran to the agents on the road nearby on purpose. Special Agent Baum had Nelson dead to rights, had the drop on him, what the rumor says Nelson said, except the safety catch on his gun was still on. Nelson said later he couldn't figure out why Baum never fired, you know, seeing that he had him cold. That little mechanical hiccup is what cost him his life. Now, Nelson killed him with a modified .38 Super Colt pistol that he had converted into full automatic. Now, in the movie, that's pretty much the end of Nelson. In real life, it was the middle of Nelson. After Little Bohemia, Nelson kept right on robbing banks. On June the 30th, 1934, he was in on the robbery of the Merchants National Bank in South Bend, Indiana, riding with Dillinger and Homer Van Meter. And a police officer got shot and killed during that. I believe that's the one that they were trying to pin on Dillinger. Then on July the 22nd, 1934, agents from what was still officially called the Division of Investigation, later be called the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, ambushed and killed Dillinger They killed Dillinger outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago. No, with Dillinger in the ground and Pretty Boy Floyd killed just weeks behind him in October 1934, Babyface Nelson backed into a little nobody. He backed into a title that nobody wanted. He became public enemy #1. The movie doesn't show any of that. It can't because it buried Nelson like a couple of months too soon. And then you've got the crimes the film won't even tip its hat to. The same night Dillinger first showed up in the Twin Cities to hook up with Nelson's crew, Nelson and his partner, John Paul Chase, got cut off in traffic by a local paint salesman named Theodore Kidder. Well, Nelson must have invented road rage because he went straight into road rage, ran Kidder down, and forced him to the curb. Now, when Kidder climbed out to say his piece, like what they do nowadays, Nelson shot him dead right there, just like what they do nowadays. A man who sold paint for a living, killed over who had the right of way. Then there was Roy Fischette. On March 22nd, 1934, by what the FBI later pieces together, Nelson and Chase grabbed Fischette. Well, he was the main witness lined up against them in an earlier case. They killed him, cut his body into little pieces, and dropped the pieces down into an abandoned mine shaft, just like what Rip does on that show. His remains never turned up. The whole partnership between Nelson and Dillinger's gang kicked off with a speech that tells you everything you need to know about the man. At the St. Francis Hotel in St. Paul, early in 1934, Nelson stood up in front of the assembled criminals and announced that before they went any further, he wanted to tell them all. He wanted them all to know he didn't take orders and that he'd walk into a bank, open fire, kill anything that moved, grab the money, and be gone. So you can see why even Dillinger eventually decided Nelson was too dangerous to work alongside, especially if you were already in there when Nelson walks in and he starts shooting. And then came the Battle of Barrington, the part the film erased clean off the map because Nelson's already dead by then. On November 22nd, 1934, FBI Inspector Samuel Cowley and Special Agent Herman Hollis spotted Nelson and Chase and Helen near the town of Barrington, just outside Chicago. What kicked off was a short, furious gunfight that ran maybe 4 or 5 minutes. Now, Nelson had body armor on, something he had taken to wearing because he flat out expected the law to come for him because he was public enemy number 1, remember. When the shooting started, he did the thing no survival instinct in the human body would tell you to do. He is cold and calculated. Instead, what he did, instead of taking cover, he just jumped out in the middle of the open and walked straight at the 2 FBI agents, walking into their gunfire thinking that his vest was going to help him, I guess. Anyway, he took 9 hits doing it. A machine gun slug ripped through his belly because if he turned sideways, there ain't nothing there on some of them old ones. 8 shotgun pellets caught him in the legs, and the man kept coming. Inspector Cowley was hit and killed while he was taking cover in the ditch. And Nelson killed Agent Hollis. Both agents died. The press first rented that Nelson got hit 17 times, but they say the real number was 9, and the 9 did a pretty good job, you know. Now, bleeding out, because he got hit in that side with that 45 caliber slug that came from Cowley. Bleeding out, Nelson had Chase drive him and Helen to a safe house on Walnut Street in Wilmette. His last words to his wife were plain enough. He told her, well, he's done for. He died around 8 o'clock that evening at 25 years old. Inspector Cowley, hanging on to life in a hospital bed, got out a few words with Melvin Purvis before he passed. Now, what he said about Nelson was chilling in how simple it was, that nothing would bring him down. Public enemies handed the audiences a dangerous man. What the road handed babyface Nelson and what he handed everybody else who crossed him was a whole lot worse than that. Now, that's a story worth telling, and someday somebody's going to get it right. It wasn't public enemies. And I'll see you in the next episode of The Hidden Lens.